Hello, and welcome to the Polar Opposites podcast. Have you ever felt that you just can't get movies or even TV shows off of your mind? Let's say you just got off work, school perhaps. Maybe you just don't have anything at all going on. And this is the podcast for you. On this podcast, we'll be discussing all your favorite things to stream or watch. My name is Brendan Polar, and I will be your host on this podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome back to the Polar Opposite podcast. This episode is our first edition in the retro reviews, which is movies that people may have heard of that we'll basically be talking about that have been out for, let's say, 30, 40 years, maybe even more, that both of us have never seen this movie, so we're kind of going into it with fresh eyes, as if almost like we were watching the movie for the first time back then. So the movie we're reviewing today is Once Upon a Time in America, and that is Sergio Leone's last movie. And a lot of you, especially millennials people, probably aren't familiar with the name Sergio Leone. He's most associated with The Good and the Bad, the Ugly, and let's see, actually that's his most famous one, but the ones that star Clint Eastwood as The Man with No Name is his most famous film biography. And that was actually his early work. He's done things before that, but this was his last work before he died literally 13 years later. So he was actually trying to get this movie done for a while, but it's kind of, we'll dive into that in a little bit, but it's actually interesting, the whole movie aspect of it. And actually, considering how much money went into this movie, we actually just learned, and how much money it made back, it's actually kind of disappointing because, I mean, maybe, I'm not really knowing how people's aspects was in the 80s, like as far as attention for movies, but maybe this wasn't a big seller for a lot of people even back then. So too slow, too long, because the movie is like almost, 4 hours long. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, but let's actually just break it down as far as the movie itself. So the movie stars Robert De Niro as Noodles, James Woods as Max, Elizabeth McGovern as Deborah, and we have Cheat Williams as Jamie O'Deal, and we have Tuesday Weald, who is that platinum blonde you mentioned, Carol, Burt Young as Joe Pesci as Frankie, who's not in the movie very long, but Joe Pesci always steals the scene, man. Am I right?
Telling some stories and stuff.
Pretty much. And we have this guy, you may have seen him in a couple of Spike Lee joints. The one he was most famous was for Do the Right Thing. This guy's name is Danny Aiello, excuse me. And he plays Police Chief... Oh, Aiello. Funny, after his last name. Okay, I see what he's doing there. And we got William Forsythe as Cockeye, who is a very interesting character within himself, just his look alone. And we have James Haddon as Patsy, Daryl Fugalo as Eve, Larry Ramp as Fat Joe. And these are the main characters that I'll mention that have like the most coherent, grounding in the story as far as as the movie progresses. So the movie starts with actually very interesting. I was talking to Alfred here about this because it's interesting because I don't think today something like this would be done in movies, and especially even in gangster movies. But we start with these three mob gangsters, and so actually, God, I don't. Do you remember did they name them or not?
What?
The mob bosses, the ones who came after De Niro.
They
They didn't name
him.
him, right? Okay.
I actually thought that they was hired by James Woods or something.
So did I, for a little bit.
Which would make sense, but doesn't make sense in the space of the end of the movie.
Yeah, how it all ties up.
Yeah.
So the movie starts with these three mob bosses going into a house, and they're looking for De Niro's character named Noodles. And I guess it turns out Noodles ratted out on James Woods' character's Max. So, as he just said, we're led to believe that perhaps this was a hit let out by, Max to kind of like just kill Noodles as like some kind of payback or retribution for what he did. And it's not that at all. The movie, before we get too confused here, we want to just disclose that the movie has a non-linear storyline, so it jumps around a lot. Like, you really, and the movie, like I said, is 4 hours long, so like you really have to keep up as far as like your attention. Am I wrong? Like this movie has like very details, little details, big details that like all come about. And like if you actually pay attention, or even if you kind of like start to like latch onto something as we did, like notice things, and then you kind of see how it all comes together, you're like, huh, okay, that's interesting. There's some things that still are kind of questionable, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So the movie starts off with De Niro, and he's in, I guess, what I think the movie, everybody's on what's it called, Ambien. Like they're all like smoking like out of a pipe, and
that's heroin.
Oh, that was heroin. Yeah. Excuse me, scary heroin. Yeah. I don't know. I said Ambien. Heroin. Heroin. He was trying to use it for something. Trying to like get out of his thoughts. Excuse me. That was his Ambien.
An opium den.
Yeah, opium den. That's what it was.
Which was kind of a funny space. I wouldn't, because I don't know the era and I don't necessarily know how true to life that is. But it was kind of a subtle, like, I mean, maybe it had to do with like the time frame, but like it was kind of like a little racist in a subtle space because like all the Asian people that was in this Chinese theater were like super like the stereotypical wearing like these Bruce Lee outfits and like they didn't speak at all. They were just like they were to be seen but not heard. And like and then he was in an opium den.
He was an opium den. That's kind of interesting.
Chinese theater.
Kind of like set him like his thoughts out, and he's kind of remembering even like what led up to this moment, like a phone call that keeps ringing in his head. You see like these flashbacks that we get into later on, and then he's like remembering basically that moment, that turning point when he was gonna make that phone call to the cops and turn James Woods in, and it kind of haunts him, and he kind of just can't get out of his zone. So from there, we go all the way back to 1920 when they were just wee lads meeting on the streets, I guess. So we have De Niro, who's played by this kid named Scott Tillier. And so basically, they live on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, New York. And so they work for an Irish gangster named Bugsy, who's played by James Russo. And Bugsy's the guy who's been calling the shots pretty much at this time period. Like even the cop says like he's the one who kind of like pays off the cops. Like they can do things like apparently rape minors, and cops don't go like, you remember that? Like cops don't go like do any kind of shit because as long as you're with Bugsy, you're safe. Pretty much. It's that period where like you got gangsters on your back and you're good. You like your family's safe. No one's gonna fuck with you. It's that kind of shit. What were you gonna say?
I would say, and from my interpretation, Bugsy was more of a rival, and they were actually coming up. And like Bugsy was just kind of like, imagine you have the 16, 17-year-old kid and they're like 12, 13. And so from my interpretation, they were actually going against Bugsy. Like they were on Bugsy's block. So what you're saying is true in the space of that Bugsy pays off the cops to look the other way. And how it all started is they like how James, De Niro and James Woods characters, Max and Noodles, got their start. Was they? It was funny too because Max randomly had this camera, like he used to have like this still frame.
Yeah, that he takes a picture of it.
And then like I think it was Cockeye or Patsy. I think it was Patsy who happened to see the Patsy was literally about to go and give this character Peggy
a cake.
A cake. I can't remember the name of it. It's like
that's how they get laid, apparently.
Yeah, that's how they get laid in New York. They feed this girl Patsy a cake, and then, like, you see Patsy later, or not Patsy, but Peggy later. And,
yeah,
like, she like cake.
Yeah, and she get kicked out.
And in that way, she goes up to the roof where, you know, she would go, like, that's her business area. And then Patsy saw the cop go up there, and he went and got Noodles.
Mm-hmm.
Noodles got Max got his camera, and they got a picture of the cop who was hooking up with Peggy, who at this time would have to be around 14, years old too.
Maybe younger.
And so, right, and then in that way, that's how they get their blackmail, so that they was like, hey, whenever you're on the beat, whoever the people is underneath you, like, you let them know who we are and let us do our thing. And then the cop was like, Bugsy's gonna have your head, basically. Like, Bugsy runs these streets.
Yeah, you don't fuck with Bugsy.
Yeah. So in that way, that's kind of the intro to where everything kind of like goes in their rise.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And so from there we have, they do things that, like, I mean, I have to say, like, on the aspect of, like, just the way that kids are, probably even especially around this time period, it seems like it's very accurate. And I mean, like, they're doing things like they're trying to, and it comes back later on. This is one of the small details I'm mentioning, but they have they're attempting to steal one of those, like, really special, like, what do you call it? Like, it's like a locket / pocket watch. And they're trying to steal it off this drunk guy that they see. That's kind of like one of their first kind of interactions that they have as characters.
Yeah,
Max and Noodles. That's how their debacle and friendship starts, and they're the two most, I would say, interesting characters. Not just because of the main characters, but because, like, how he brought up something interesting. How, like, certain things, like, at some point in the movie, later on, James Woods is he's triggered by something as simple as, like, Robert De Niro saying to him when he wants to do a job, look, you're crazy, I don't want to be part of this. And just James Woods goes off on him. I'm like, the most James Wood kind of fashion you could see. And I think it's interesting because, like, it really does greatly play to these actors, like, great aspects. Like, I've never, like, seen De Niro and James Woods together in, like, a movie, like, in general, but I've never seen them in a movie together where, like, you actually feel like, oh man, like, there's nobody who, I mean, I don't think at this period could have played anybody better than these two. They're so well played by these characters. But go ahead, what are you gonna say?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I think I've seen James Woods, like, later in the career, like in the 90s or something.
Yeah, that's when I grew up with him.
But, like, I had never seen James Woods before, and, like, I never seen James Wood as a young man. Let's just say it like that. And, like,
it's kind of trip, right?
Yeah, like, and it was like, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, James Woods probably was like one of those, like, those actors that, women would swoon over. I was like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I was like, it was like, for sure.
The guy's suave.
Yeah, I was like, because, like, he, even as Max, he always had the three-piece suit. He always had, like, the cummerbund
cigar
and stuff.
Yeah,
Max was very high class. And, like, even, you would imagine that, like, maybe his family had something and whatever. Maybe it could have been the recession kind of thing, the Great Depression, because that was the time frame of it.
Yeah.
That, like, maybe they hit hard times, because when you see, because again, what even was striking about the whole introduction of them getting their big break was, like, he had a camera. Like that camera couldn't have been cheap. You know what I mean?
Oh no, that's an expensive ass camera. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, like, in the beginning scene, you have James Woods, Max, actually, his family had a chandelier that they brought. And the chandelier, in anybody's time period, represents wealth. Like, a chandelier is, like, something that, wealthy people have, crystal chandeliers or something.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just one of those pieces.
It's a statement.
It's a statement piece. You're not going to get a statement piece like that just because you want it to. You get it because you can. And so it's like, it's in that space of, like, they must have came from something. So he had a certain class to him. Max had a certain class compared to all the other kids.
Yeah.
Which made sense to why he was the leader in that way. And
Yeah.
and even though Noodles was actually the leader because he knew all the friends, but as we go through the rest of the movie, Noodle does leave for some years, so it makes sense of why he would have developed into the actual leader, or to the current leader, I should say.
That he is.
Because Noodles left for a minute, so it made sense. But yeah, Max definitely had a certain class about him.
He did, and so it's kind of interesting to see all these kids just kind of like go about, like meeting each other, and it's interesting because like you kind of think to yourself, like you see them as kids and you're like, okay, like where's, like, because I was thinking to myself watching this movie, like where's like the lead into like where they got into like the gangster life. But what I got the aspect is that like I said earlier, like them doing things like robbing the drunk guy just randomly for no reason. I guess that kind of small petty crime is kind of like what the director and the story was kind of saying as far as what was leading to them choosing the bad lifestyle as far as them being gangsters. They started off kind of small doing like those kind of things and then blackmailing the cop. But like it's just interesting because like even for kids it's like, okay, I could even today see kids trying to do this, but like I mean to turn all of a sudden to a gangster lifestyle. But then like you said, at one point what happens is Noodles, Robert De Niro's character, goes away to jail for like I guess for a period of time, because like when he gets out they're all adults. Yeah. And then James Woods comes to picks him up and he's like, I haven't seen you in so long, how you been? And James Wood, as we said earlier, like he's suave, he's like it's interesting because like he's like you can see like the aspects of like his when you saw him as a kid, but like as a kid he was cocky. He's still cocky as an adult, but like as an adult he's more refined. But I'm trying to think of the word, like he has grown. Maybe that's obviously for the obvious reasons of like De Niro being in prison for so long,
right,
and James Woods having thrived, like you said, with his family and like probably with business. Like he's fucking showing up in like probably like a nice ass, I imagine, car for that period. So it's like James Wood is the one who's like balling in this time period. And that actually, we'll get into that a little bit because there's something questionable that happens to James Woods later on in the movie that we kind of think, okay, even with all his wealth and status, how did he manage to like get away from all this? But let's kind of like dive into that a little bit, but because we have a little bit more as far as how we get to let's see, because the movie does have a lot as far as the period piece in the 20s. So basically, to sum it up, the kids come together, and there's little details basically, like, because before we get too lost, when the movie begins in 1968, we have Robert De Niro, who's aged out now, and he's been on a prolonged absence, as the movie describes to us, and he's called back for reasons that were not known or are not described to us in the beginning or kind of hinted towards. And so we're led to believe that it's some maybe kind of big job, because we're now getting hints that he's a gangster. He has kind of ties to the mob, at least. So they're looking for him, or like there's something going on as far as that. So we're led to believe like what's going on as far as De Niro's character, where is he going? And so De Niro is going through all these kind of like different kind of like locations, and one of the locations he goes to is like, it looks like a I think it's supposed to be like a train stop or a bus stop at one point, because they have like it's a public place, and they have like a locker that they go to with a very certain combination that De Niro enters. And when De Niro opens it, there's a suitcase in there, and the suitcase of course has a stack of money and even kind of like remnants of like notes and things. And we're getting hints of like, okay, this was something to do with De Niro's life, like previously to what he was today. And so we imagine that the movie's going to get into that at one point. So we do dive into that. We see how the kids come together, and they have that moment where
they all agree to keep the money.
They keep the money.
Because it's like, because even as you mentioned earlier, like how they got into the life, it is a very innocent space because as kids it's like you look at it as petty crimes because it's like these kids, there's no such thing as formal education at this time period.
No.
And then like in that way, like there's no real way that their parents are paying for anything. You have to go out and get your own money. Like you see the I can't remember the dude's name, but the kid that dies, he's roughly around 8. Like you'd imagine he's 8-7 because you really see he's still a child. Whereas like even Patsy's like 9-10, and he kind of like he's ready to have sex.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like
and
like so he has to be at least 10 to 11. And like in that way, and like
maybe even 12.
Yeah, like nah, I think he's maybe 12, but I think like if you would look at an age range based upon height, you could definitely say Max was around like 13, 14.
Sure, he was the biggest out of all of them.
Yeah, and Noodles was like 12, 13.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Then, and I could see Cockeye around. Actually, I could see Cockeye being older than Noodles, but Cockeye's like he's not the brains of the operation.
No.
So like Cockeye is like he's just like that cool kid. Like he's like the the guy who's the quiet guy. And he's always down to hang out. You know what I mean? Like, he's just a really cool person. But he's not going to be the person who's going to be calling shots or nothing. And then, like, Patsy seems like he's the young guy. But, like, I could see actually Patsy being the guy who, like, probably is a talker. Probably is going to do stuff. Like, he might be the guy who's actually going out to find jobs and stuff, and then brings it back to Noodles and Max, and then they agree on it. He's like active in that way.
Yeah.
And so in that space, like the little kid, he's like 7 or 8, and so but like my point in all of that is that pickpocketing a guy, like you even see like they know the men in the neighborhood who are kind of I wouldn't call them mob bosses, but like let's call them like regents. Like they're the guys in the neighborhood who's own the business, who like is like, and I won't call it so much to say mafia, but like so in these situations, especially in old New York, you had neighborhoods that were racist. So like they lived in the Jewish neighborhood.
They did. So
in that way, they all were Jews. They all were Jews by birth. And in that way, they in all type of communities, you always have the guys who are in the community who grew up there and they know everybody and they play the game. And how they kind of grew up. And so like there's a scene where like where they go and burn down the newsstand. Because the guy didn't pay up. He didn't pay the people. And in that way, they go and burn the newsstand. And it was almost kind of like an Orthodox Jew versus like Protestant Jew almost. Because you could tell that they were Orthodox Jews at the newsstand because they dressed a certain way. And then it was Protestant Jews that were kind of like, maybe the more Americanized aspect. Because like the guy who owned the Deborah's family were Orthodox Jews, because there's a scene where they go off to like some like mass, say it's like a special Sunday, special day of prayer, and so that they were like particular Jews, and or more Orthodox, they actually went to church type thing. So my point is like they lived in this neighborhood and they were doing things that were very simple, and then like when you get to the moment where they actually are able to blackmail the cop, all they wanted to do was keep pickpocketing. Like they just didn't want to get caught for it.
Yeah.
Like they weren't like on some nefarious shit.
No.
They just wanted to. There's a drunk like because like in that scene that I'm talking about where they there's a scene where they go into like a bar and they talk to a guy that says, "Hey, we just did the newsstand job. Like pay us money." And then they're and then the guy's like, "Well, all right, whatever." And then they were like, Noodles starts looking at people in the bar to say, "Oh, we're gonna roll this guy because like you give us permission to roll them because they're drunks. They paid up, or maybe they didn't pay, or maybe whatever. Like the guy, the adult says, hey, you can roll this guy, or you can roll that guy, because like, you roll this guy, like, he's a good tipper. We don't want you to roll that guy, because we want him to come back.
Right.
This guy, he kind of tips. It's like, you can roll him.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, and it's like, and so that's how you even get the introduction of Max to
Noodles.
because they were going to roll the drunk guy. And so once they actually get their authority through the cop that, hey, we're not going to bust you if you do some petty stuff, they're like running their gambit. And then when they decide to elevate is like that moment where Noodles gets the idea, or somebody gets the idea, but Noodles presents the idea of hey, you have he talks to whatever like bootleggers at the time. It says you have these cargo, and when you bring it in on the ships, the Coast Guard always comes. You have to dump your cargo. So there's an idea that you might lose a certain percent, if not all, of your cargo, because you throw a wood crate into the water, it's just gonna sink.
Sure.
So they attach the crate to a sandbag or a bag of salt, and then they have a balloon, like a little buoy. And
that's what gets the bootleg around.
Exactly. And as soon as the salt, like everything's gonna fall down, the salt dissolves, and then enough buoyancy is allowed that the bubble, the buoy will come back up, and that's how they get their break. That's how they actually even enter into bootlegging, because they could have went into anything.
Yeah.
But they just so happen to have the idea, and of course they just keep it going because they get 10% off of whatever they bring in, because like, who else is going to give 10% to the kids that's actually going to allow you to keep 100% of your product?
Exactly.
And so in that way, it was like, that's how they get their break into bootlegging at all. And like, yeah, there's scenes where they actually do straight gangster stuff. They kill people, but you almost would imagine like they could have lived a good life of like just being clean, good-hearted bootleggers.
That's what I was thinking. Like the gangster lifestyle wasn't really necessary for them. It just seemed like they just were like, hey, we're already like halfway into it. Let's just go like full measure. Why half measure?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I took it, because it's like you bring up a great point, because like the bootlegging was enough for them. There's really no aspect of like why they had to continue on to this path of killing people and murdering, and then ended up having other people close to them being murdered. It's like, I mean, there's always just that kind of interesting aspect, lifestyle that gangster movies portray and have. And I guess in real life, there are gangsters out there obviously like that who, I mean, your family is in the thick of it and you're collateral damage. You're going to get stuck.
Yeah.
If somebody, that you knew that you're looking for, like in the beginning of the movie, that you like this poor woman just gets shot twice, not once but twice by these mobsters. And it's like the movie just kind of sets up this, it's not like he said it earlier, but it's not too brutal. Like there's not that much deaths. And the movie is very slow. It does take its time, but it does set up this aspect of like drawing out and leading up to like all these bigger things, like like you think, okay, like we said earlier, like De Niro's being hunted down by like these mobsters, and it turns out no, like De Niro's just kind of actually he was intentionally being brought back to James Woods' character, who well, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around too much. This movie, I'm telling you, like it's crazy how much it jumps around. But let's dive back into like the later part of like their, because from their I guess their early preteen years, which is when we start to see them come together, and the whole bootlicking thing happens. I'm trying to actually bring up, so Noodles, that's what happens. So Noodles is going out, and actually, surprisingly, even though it's kind of interesting how the roles, I guess, kind of shift with that, but we said that James Woods is the more brutal of the type, like where he's triggered by words, and that's more of something that maybe triggered on like later on in James Woods' life, that I don't know if we're led to believe or not in the movie, but in the beginning of the movie, as far as when he's a kid, James Wood is smooth, he's charismatic, and that's obviously the reason why the kids just support him as being the leaders, because out of all of them, he's the most interesting to listen to because of how charismatic he is. And so, Noodles goes to prison because he's in a fit of rage. He stabs a cop, and, It's
even in that, like, you know, like that's actually
I think that was his
big
first kill too. Yeah,
that was his only kill.
Yeah, it was
no,
his only-
no, this is his first. He killed 2 people.
yeah.
But like, you know, like right after that scene where they get that big break of the bootlegging, and then you see everybody like, and like it's cool because it's like a very stark. It's like I can't sit here and say that like I noticed any like lighting changes, but they're everything shifted for them, like because like they go from kids who make 5 cents in a day because they freaking have enough money to go get, you know, a cake or a drink or whatever, to like actually having money to where they can actually get dressed. Because like boy, it was like you knew it was too good to be true, because like the little boy, he has this like this outfit on, and like he's stylish. He's probably like, I would say maybe it was just because of his age and his size, but his suit was probably the best suit out of everybody. Like if you saw the kids right after the bootleg scene and you saw all of them what they had on, like his suit was fire. It's like and then so you lead into the space where they go down the street and they see Bugsy. And Bugsy is like jealous because, you know, like at this point they're probably making more money than Bugsy, and I would imagine they're not really into Bugsy's territory, because you could imagine Bugsy is like a heavy. Bugsy's like a muscle type of guy. Like Bugsy's not a brain, and Bugsy probably like would probably like, he might be the guy who's an enforcer who would go to a place and say, you need to pay us money for protection, or like he probably would go and destroy things just for the sake of like, oh, you're
sending a message.
Yeah, sending a message, and then in that way, you know, they're coming up, and it's almost more or less like he's jealous of their money. You know, he's jealous of their money, not like they're really impeding on his territory, because like at the real life, their territory is, we're gonna go into the harbor and go fish out some fucking boxes, and we're gonna give it to the people, which probably the same people who could be giving Bugsy his product to even probably sell off to people. You know what I mean? So in a lot of ways, like they actually probably was. I mean, say if Bugsy was also in that kind of racket of the booze, because that was probably a big racket at the time, you know, at least an open one, that like, you know, either Bugsy gonna be drinking some booze that they fishing out the water, or he gonna sell it to him. You know what I mean? Like so it's like, it's almost like he was just jealous of their money. You know, he wouldn't like, they wouldn't step on his territory. And then Bugsy,
he was just a hater.
Yeah, and Bugsy has a gun, and he ends up shooting the little boy, and the little boy dies. And then, you know, that's what you say, he goes into the fit of rage, and then he kills Bugsy, and then like a cop pulls up, and like he's in a fit of rage, he doesn't know what's happening, he just like feels somebody on the shoulder, so he starts stabbing the cop too, which makes sense, because, you know, like, man, like, you know, in a certain space, you know, like maybe if it was a different time period, or, you know, like probably not just because he still killed a cop, but like you can almost say like he was like traumatized, and like, let's just say in this era of time, he probably would have gotten off, or at least went to a different facility, because he would have been in a traumatic state, because like he just saw his friend die. This guy killed his friend.
Yeah, he got shot.
Now he's coming, like the guy is pursuing him. So you would almost say it was self-defense. Like in a lot of ways, it was self-defense, because like they were literally cowering behind boxes. This guy has a gun and he's trying to kill him. Like he's aggressively trying to kill them. And so it's like,
and he
could have
does
been
kill
looking
one
for him that day. You know what I mean? And like in that way, he freaking shot the little boy. You know, dude's, like you said, fit of rage. And then like he stabs him up, and then like somebody pulls on your shoulder. Like after you stab somebody up and you see a friend die, like you're not thinking, you know. And so he shanks the freaking cop, and then of course he goes to jail. And so it's like, yeah, like that sucks, but at the same time, it's like, you know, it's like it gives that space of where you're coming from in that way of like James Woods, to where like now Max is in the game. And even if Max wasn't the leader, he was the person who got the audience for the bootleggers to even start doing their job. Because Max had the conversation, but Noodles had presented the idea.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, Noodles left, because Noodles is probably absolutely going to be the absolute leader, but because like those are his friends. And then Max is like, well, shit, Noodles is gone, and we have money, and so, you know, as a piece of that gets talked about when they meet up after prison, he's like, Noodles is like, thank you for taking care of my family. You know, because like Noodles stood up as a man and like took care of his family in that space of like maybe Gabe broke off his mom some money, and then like you come to find out, like you said, the car that they were driving in is a Hearst, and that Hearst is like a business like that they own, and they're all clean, which is like another level of kind of what you're saying. Like they didn't really have to play the game. But, you know, there's fronts. You know, you got to be able to wash the money.
Sure.
And in that way, it's like, if they're gangsters, people are dying every day, so they know who to go pick up and, like, whose families is about to die and who's going to need their services.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, it's actually a really legitimate business running a freaking mortuary. But my point is to say that, like, Noodles was actually a business partner inside of that clean business. So, like, you could say that, like, Noodles' mama was receiving whatever check Noodles would be receiving, and plus I'm sure he has money on his books.
Yeah,
you know. So it's like you would imagine like that, like their family probably came up, got out the slums in some aspect of if Noodles' mom is now receiving this check that she's not working for. You know what I mean? And it's going to be well more than whatever she's making as a woman on her own. And even if Noodles had a dad, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like they probably lived in a labor type of situation. So like. You just got money that's now coming into the spot, and even as a space, it's a legitimate business, so nobody has to feel crummy about, oh, this is drug money or something, or this is, you know, dirty money. Like, that's a legitimate business. Like, you know, like
no one's gonna look the other way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can claim that with pride,
and
like especially in the space of like. If like you know kind of wanted to look at it like, hey, like Noodles is a part of a whole business, I could actually talk about this to my friends.
Sure.
You know, oh yeah, he's in jail, but this is what he did. You know, like, or this is how his friends hooked him up, and you know, like I'm just saying as a space of like being a real human in this moment and like actually having, you know, it's not just these dirty mobsters. It's not like these people who are just outside killing people and ruining the neighborhood.
No.
You know what I mean? Like they're not flooding the streets with like heroin or nothing. You know what I mean? It's like
they're not doing anything like completely out of the norm. You know what I mean?
You know?
At least at this period too, it almost seems like I'm not saying everybody was like this, but I'm just saying like I could see a lot of people kind of fitting into this category of who these people are. You know, fronting businesses to like kind of like have, because like I don't know, man. I mean, like back then, like you gotta wonder how like a lot of people were able to like get around and make a living. Like these people, like these young people, young men are like, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting because like I said this before, but like I really was impressed because like, you know, out of all the gangster movies that I've seen recently, like this is the one that really like portrays them as like the most like human and the most like grounded and the most even realistic. Like I feel like these people could even exist today, like, and I'm pretty sure they do, like people that, you know, they have a business that they're fronting, but you know, deep down there's probably something else that they're trying to like, you know, get going for themselves. And I don't know, like it's just so interesting because the director had like a lot of research behind that, but it's so interesting just to know the inner workings behind that as he's describing, like, you know, just how gangsters are trying to like affiliate themselves like with like not being like a criminal. Like they don't want to fall into that category of like, oh, you know, I'm a criminal who steals things, who murders people, like you said. They just want to be legitimate businessmen. At least that's out of all of them. I feel like James Woods is probably the one who was trying to like out of all of them live that lifestyle. Am I wrong? Like, you know, because he, like you said, he owns a mortuary, and so actually that's actually where we start the movie after the early years in the 20s. We jump 12 years later, and now it's the early 1930s, and De Niro gets out of prison. James Woods comes to pick him up, and he even greets him with like a lovely woman to like literally go there and go at it in the back, and gets it in. And you know, De Niro kind of actually is coming to like, you know, all his friends are happy to see him, but he's coming into like a world that he kind of feels lost in, I would say. And something that we forgot to mention too, but De Niro in those early scenes had a very strong infatuation for Deborah, who's what's it called? What's his name? The guy with the cockeyes sister. No,
she's not
no, not
Clock's
Clock's sister. Fat Mo's sister. Sorry for confusing the characters. Fat Mo's character's sister. And so there's kind of like an early like as far as like it's, I love like it's actually interesting. I just learned this recently. It was Jennifer Connelly who played young Deborah. I looked at those eyes and I was like, okay, I feel like I've seen those strong, beautiful green eyes somewhere before, and it's just so interesting because like the we haven't said this I don't think yet, but like the movie as far as the casting from the kids to like even how the actual current actors age up later on in the movie is done fantastically. Like the kid who plays fucking young Noodles, not James Woods, De Niro's character, like I mean they went as far like I was like oh my god, like I praised the director, the fucking mole. I was like wow, Sergio, like the little details that you went through just to like make sure every one of these kids is cast like to the T looking like the actual actor was like wow, like so amazing. And I mean just something to really be appreciated for this kind of movie. So like I said, De Niro is infatuated with Fat Mo's sister, Deborah, and Deborah grows up to be an actress, and we can kind of already see that because she has that very sassy personality. One of the recurring lines is the movie when they first meet. De Niro, is trying to like make the moves on Deborah, and Deborah like they get caught usually halfway through this by De Niro's mom, and there's that classic line where Deborah's like, "Go on, Noodles, your mother's calling you," and it just has like this whole aspect of like they have chemistry, yes, but a little bit of like I think it's very common for kids like this, especially because if you can remember being that age, like this debacle of like having a woman, not a woman, but like a little girl that you are interested in, but you don't want to admit it. It's kind of like I don't know. That's the way I saw it as. And
oh yeah, when she calls him a roach.
Yeah.
And then
roach.
They're outside and then he talks to his friends. It's like she keeps talking to me like that. I'm just gonna give it to her or something
right.
like that. Yeah, kind of that like pull her hair, push her down in the dirt kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the space of like I like you, but I can't let my friends know I like you.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
Pretty much. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, from there we jump to like I said, the 30s, and now so Noodles is reunited with his friends, and this is a party where they meet Joe Pesci, Frankie Manotto, I think that's how you say his name, and his partner Joe Burt Young, who's familiar if you guys have ever watched the Rocky franchise. He's Adrian's brother, and so Noodles comes in and is introduced to Frankie, and in a very classical kind of Joe Pesci, De Niro kind of fashion, they have this very kind of awkward introduction to each other, and Joe Pesci comes in and he's like, "Hey man, like I'm." It's so funny how like Joe Pesci kind of just like portrays his characters like. And they're usually always the same, like as far as like gangster characters. Like, hey, I'm a gangster, but I'm just like you. Like I'm like, I kill people, sure, for a living sometimes when I have to. But you know what? Like I have a sip of coffee like every other guy does. Like, I have fun. It's good. It's just like I love how Joe Pesci just comes in and James Woods is the one to make the introduction to Joe Pesci because I guess he has an association with him. And, De Niro is, like, questioning, like, this is kind of like De Niro, like, because I got the feeling that when De Niro kind of came out of prison, like, I don't think that his going into, like, the gangster lifestyle was his first choice. At least, did you catch that? I didn't.
I mean, I could see in the space of, like, he wouldn't have known anything else, but to a gangster lifestyle at the level of that they were at, like absolutely not. Like he definitely wasn't expecting I mean, I'm sure he had no real expectations. I mean, I don't know if they were corresponding in letters, kind of a thing, but like, just to imagine, walking out and like even to a certain space, I don't even know if he was expecting Max to pick him up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think they knew, like, because everybody knew that it was happening, and I won't necessarily say that there was a party for him. I think it was like this was just an everyday moment where everybody was at the speakeasy, and it just how happened to be like, well, we're gonna also celebrate this.
Yeah.
And then it was like, and then like he definitely wasn't. He was utterly shocked at the speakeasy itself, and he was utterly shocked at the mortuary business, and like he just knew that his family was being taken care of. He didn't really know any actual details.
No.
And so like to walk in, with this immediate moment of Joe Pesci and the guy, which leads up to the scene,
the heist.
Yeah, the heist
that he wants him to pull.
Yeah, it's like to walk into a moment talking about, oh, I got a heist job. Absolutely not. Like, absolutely couldn't have expected any of the flow of it, everything. But I mean, he's that cool, calm, collected guy. And then, in a solo space, it's like it kind of also speaks to the era of the type of man that is of that era, that of like not necessarily ask too many questions, not less like a big thinker type of a guy.
Yeah.
Just kind of I'm just gonna stick my head down and get the job done kind of a thing. And he has moments where like he still is like this, I don't want to take orders from anybody, and like almost to say like I'm an independent man, but like, because like in a space of cockeye comparatively, or even I can't think of his guy's name, but the other guy, like those two guys, especially cockeye, would seem like if all you did was give him orders, he would be okay, But like a Max and a Noodles, like to give them orders didn't really make sense. You had to like enroll them. You had to really convince them that this was something that was going to benefit them.
Yeah.
And like, and then at that moment where, they were about to walk into this heist, like he didn't really want to do it. Like in a moment of the sitting at the scene with Pesci, it didn't seem like he wanted to do it at all, because he actually did question Pesci or question the other guy.
He did.
But like Max kind of like whoa, he said something that kind of like calmed the moment down, and then Pesci kept talking, and then the guy went into a story about how he hooked up with the Platinum Blonde.
Yeah.
She became a Platinum Blonde.
And the whole story about the
insurance guy.
The pussy insurance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's like dick insurance. He's like this guy, he like came to a bar that he met him at, and like obviously he had money, and like he was talking, and he was like at the bar, and the guy was just talking about business, and he was still on the job while we was like hanging out, and he was like, well, he's like, hey, if you want to give me some insurance, he's like, insure my dick. And he was like, he was like, leave your wife here, and if my dick don't work, then like, hey, like, what is it? But if it works, then he's like, write my policy up. It was like, and he was like, the guy. It was so funny the way the guy, because it sounds like this was just a very verbatim real life story, to where like the guy literally was like, all right, well, I'll write the policy for you, and then he literally left his woman there, and the mobster hooked up with his woman, and then as they were hooking up, she told him about the freaking that she worked for a jeweler, and which is like funny, because like to actually talk about the heist was funny because they walk into the place, they have their masks on, they know all the stuff to do, they like literally go after all the phones, they know where all the phones are. They get the guys all corralled, like all together to where like subdued, I should say. And then the woman, she goes super hard, and like Noodles happens to be the one that like is like, whoa, like you're going hard, like you're coming at Max, like let me grab you to stop doing anything. And then she's like she starts talking under her breath. She's like, oh my god, you monster, in a whisper. And she's like, hit me, make it real.
Yeah.
And the guy, and Noodles like, what?
Like, what the fuck?
Because the guy at the bar, I can't remember the guy's name. He was Joe. He tells everybody not to hurt the woman, because I guess like he wanted to hook up with her again, like going with a black eyed, she actually opened the door for us, so like there's no reason to hurt her,
right?
Not like he's trying to protect her, but at the same time, it's like it's like hey, like show some respect, I guess, as a woman, and like, hey, like there's no need to like just wall off and lollywop her just because, you know, because like they hit the men, you know what I mean, and like as I say, she was like, if maybe they didn't get that warning, she was on extra, they would have hit her too,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, and so he just walked her, took her in the room, she's like, hit me. And he was like, all right, I'll hit you. Mm-hmm. And he pulled her like dress down,
starts fucking her.
Yeah, so he gets it in and she's having a good time. Like, oh my god, you monster.
And meanwhile she's like, enjoying it.
Yeah, she's like, and then like at the end of the scene you see her shudder, so you know she came. And so it's like, it was like funny space, you know, because of that. And, you know, like, you know, he got his rocks off, you know, and like. You know, they got their money, and then leading into the next scene of like them actually showing up to the drop off where they exchange the money for the jewels. And I don't even know if they ever really got the jewels or not. I think they just like killed the people and then left. Like they didn't even get the jewels out the car, which is kind of funny. Like, they didn't show it anyway. And so they end up killing Joe, and they don't kill, like, you know, Pesci wasn't in the car, so and Joe seemed like he was a high level ranking person himself.
Sure.
And in that way, you know, they have this dialogue of between Max and Noodles of like, hey, you know, like kind of what you were asking earlier. Like he was like, man, I didn't walk out of prison to get into this life, you know, because like I just killed somebody, you know, like sure, you know, I'm as a space of like, oh, I gotta do what I gotta do, but at the same time, his mindset wasn't like, I'm about to start killing people. No. And like at the same time, it was like bro, like we're in this big deep life to where like if they want me gone, or as he said, we talked like, I guess it was like there was a high level guy, and then there was Joe, and then I guess the high level guy told them to kill Joe, or there was some space that Joe was like a roadblock, and so they killed Joe. And then they was talking about this high level guy to where it's like, yeah, if the high level guy wants me, like Noodles speaking, high level guy wants me to kill you, Max, then like I was like, what I gotta do? I gotta kill you now? Like he's like, you're gonna kill me? And it was like, and so it was kind of like, man, like we're in this world that Noodles didn't agree to, you know. And so, you know, they run off the fucking truck into the water. Yeah. And so
I know that it is.
That sounds like they lost all that money.
I was like laughing at that scene because I was just thinking to myself like, man, like Noodles is just someone who just doesn't give a fuck. He's like James Woods, like, hey, you want to go for a swim? It's like, no, all right, Noodles, like, you want to go for a swim? Let's go for a swim. It's like,
yeah, that was definitely hilarious. Like, but yeah, that was funny. So definitely, I definitely would say that. Noodles is definitely not trying to be in that life. No. That was definitely a surprise to him. And like even the way he handled every piece of it was like, you know, he was definitely hesitant. Like Max was gun ho, and like I said, the other two guys, Patsy, that's his name, Patsy and Hawkeye was just along for the ride. You know, and you know, like Patsy seemed like he was always having fun. He always had a smile on his face. Yeah. And Hawkeye just loved to reap the benefits. You know what I mean? Like he just was happy to get to be there. Yeah. You know what I mean?
He definitely struck me as that type.
Yeah. And like I said, Patsy, like he ended up getting cut in the neck from doing a job, and you know, like he just seemed like if Max wasn't there, Patsy's the guy talking. You know, Patsy definitely seemed like he was educated and suave enough to where he could be like, he's like a regent. Like, he's a guy who would own his own territory. While Hawkeye might own territory, but Hawkeye is like, he seemed like if somebody was going to get into a fight, it would have to be him. Because he was bigger. He was the biggest guy out of the whole crew. Yeah. So, like, he definitely was going to be the one that's going to get into the fight. Or, like, if he did, he probably wouldn't accept the land, or he might have a smaller portion of land that he would go after, versus like Patsy in a comparative way, or like in a sense of like out of the mob, like out of the group. Like I said, Patsy might actually own a business. He might actually be the guy in charge of the mortuary, whereas Hawkeye would just kind of be like, he's just a guy. He's just a part of the crew. Yeah, you know. And so like it's like a very interesting dynamic of like the whole group, but like in the space of like being a part of the mob. Noodles definitely wasn't trying to be a part of the mob.
No, I didn't. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he really struck me as somebody who was like trying to get into this lifestyle.
Yeah, no,
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting because this this all kind of like culminates back to Noodles rekindling with Deborah, who's now played by Elizabeth McGovern,
Yeah.
and so he's even going as far to arrange a vacation for both of them to stay at, somewhere special, like trying to treat the lady out. And he's revealing his desire, that his love for Deborah. And it's interesting because, like, knowing his history and knowing what he's been through, despite him being conflicted with the gangster life, it's like, of course, like, deep down, Deborah can see the real him, as like most women, I guess, in that kind of scenario, with that kind of relationship with a man would. And she sees that deep down, he still in some ways hasn't grown out of that shell of being that little boy, like, as far as, because it was the same thing back then when he admitted his love for her. And the only difference, except now that they're older, is that Noodles is, I guess, to Deborah, is a lost soul that has no kind of what's the word, I guess, redemption. And I don't know, like, that's the way that I think I took as her treating him, was that it's not so much that there is, obviously, that she has feelings, and she might even love him like the same feelings that he has for her, but the restriction that she has is that she cannot bring herself to love somebody who ultimately, I guess, doesn't love themselves, and has done all these things to pretty much equally prove that he doesn't really care about his life or where it goes. And so, ironically, that's where the conflict in him comes from, is that, sure, he doesn't, like you said, doesn't want to like participate in the gangster lifestyle, but he continues to participate simply because his friends are a part of it. James Woods, his closest friends, Max, he has this very, I would say, interesting, out of all the characters, they have this very close, very, I guess you can call it, brotherly relationship with each other. And and just the way that they treat each other. I mean, they're not afraid to, like, fucking, if, like, at one point, like, we're getting closer to where, James Woods, like, beats Robert De Niro for, like, going off on him and saying that you're crazy. It's kind of interesting because it's like, this is something that almost sort of mirrors earlier in the movie when De Niro had that moment with, when he went off on the cop, and when he killed the other guy. It's like, you think, I don't know, like, these two, like, have, like, very mirrored images of each other. Like, it's no, because even De Niro makes a great joke about that. I laughed at, because, like, there's a moment where they meet Carol, the Platinum Blonde, in a, I guess it's kind of interesting because, like, it's a party, but they're in a separate room, and they have, like, a little window that they can, like, peek through. And when she comes back and meets them, she doesn't really remember their faces because they were covered up at the time, because they had, like, little bandanas covering their faces. And so she goes up to Max at first, and she's led to believe, oh, it was you that I got super close to. And De Niro's like, no, Max is like, no, it was my friend over here, Noodles. And Noodles is like, well, we've just been studying so much around each other, now we just kind of, like, look alike. Or we it's kind of like that aspect of, like, they really are, like, two sides of the same coin, right? Like, that's kind of like from that joke alone, that's kind of the thing that I got from that, was that, they almost can't live without each other, so much that that's where the movie kind of, like, leads up to towards the end. But so like, let's kind of, like, go into, like, where this movie kind of culminates towards the end, as far as, like, the Prohibition era, when it's finally, like, because even the characters, one of them mentions at one point that the Prohibition era is only going to last for so much longer, because the 30s are where the Prohibition era ended. And so, at one point we see, like, them celebrating with a giant ass cake and alcohol. And so now the boys are, their business is done, as far as, like, the bootlegging thing. So now it's kind of like, where do they go from here? And so James Woods, I feel like that's where he kind of becomes so desperate, and that's kind of where he got, I guess, a lot of his business, his early, like, his early earnings from his business was from the bootlegging thing. And so now with that being gone, he kind of becomes more desperate to the point that he's like, okay, well, we're gangsters, so let's do the old school thing and just rob a bank. And right, and so De Niro is not really with that. Like, he's questioning now, like, why he's going as far as to do that. And so, he's
Platinum Blonde definitely.
yeah, he's lost.
Him
Yeah, he forces him. Yeah.
And so the Platinum Blonde definitely, as the movie goes through its progression, it's like from meeting her as the Platinum Blonde, because she wasn't always blonde. She was, the first minute she was like brunette.
She brunette.
And so, at that point, so she becomes James Woods or Max's like main woman, and in that way
that he treats like shit.
Like she likes it though, and in that way she actually has the heart for him. So once they acknowledge that prohibition happens, you're right, he does kind of flip out, because he's like we have $1 million, which probably at that time is like is probably like $20 million, but he's like no, we need $20 million, like that's when I'll be satisfied. And of course like even I would imagine up to that point in life, they weren't probably living some extravagant lifestyle. Like they were on the beach, they had decent cars, but they didn't seem like they had $1 million, but they probably was touching maybe $50,000, $90,000, because that's $1 million out of five men, and then that's 5 men putting money back. And I would say they probably had a couple $100,000. Obviously, if they could amass $1 million, but over the course of 30 years, and you're bootlegging, and you're one of the top bootleggers, and you have multiple, presumably multiple fronts. It's not that hard to make $1 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And plus, probably back in that time frame, taxes and so many different legislations of business licenses and all those type of things probably wasn't eating away at their money. And of course, they probably could buy off the people who would be the person who would be that guy who's trying to, oh, you need to have this business license. Well, all right, the guy who would come into the neighborhood to inspect the business license, we're going to pay that single man off. And he's going to write a report that says we have it. It's it's just paying one man for the whole coalition of entity that is the business license department.
Yeah.
So it's once you can acknowledge that, it's it's actually very easy to do something like that. And so you could perpetually making this money. Plus, all of their money is utterly non-tax. They got businesses that wash the money that they are getting taxed on. So when they have a nice house and it's in their name, they have this business that's doing the money. So it makes sense. But at the same time, in the floorboards, they have, hundreds of thousands of dollars that's just being collected. So it's and plus, one of the things you acknowledged is so they have the speakeasy, which is making them money. So it's so funny because they're bootleggers, so they're making the money, bringing the booze in, and then they're getting money off of whatever they're bringing in. And then they have a speakeasy where all of the people that they just sold it to, and those guys, the distributors sell it out to the rest of the world. The distributors are coming into the speakeasy to put more money back into place because they're going to buy the booze and stuff.
Yeah.
And then what you're acknowledging is that within the speakeasy, there's a whole other section of a brothel, which is ran by Peggy. So they have a whole brothel that's making them money that, even if nobody pays for the booze, they're paying for the women, And so, you're going to have all the top men in the city, the politicians and all those type of dudes, buying the women. And these women likely aren't cheap. And so it's you're making these monies so many different ways. So yeah, I won't say they didn't have a flashy lifestyle and say $1 million isn't nothing. But let's just say the $1 million wasn't James Woods's, it wasn't Max's, it was everybody's. So if they all had if all they had was $1 million out of 5 men, each one individually didn't have they probably was worth maybe $200,000, maybe $100,000. And I'm not gonna say that that's not a lot, but what I am saying is the idea of, I guess the style and the way he went. Oh, it needs to be $20 million.
Yeah.
you would say that he could have did whatever the fuck he was doing and kept the mortuary business going, kept whatever else he was going, and just kept straight.
Mm-hmm.
But then he did break, like you said, snap or whatever. And that's what the Platinum Blonde said also, that he snapped because he stopped having sex with her.
Mm-hmm.
And all he could think about was the business. And all he could think about was trying to make more money. When, like, he had money. And it wasn't like he was in a place that he needed more money or that, like...
No, not at all.
And almost in a space where, like, it almost didn't even make sense for him to, like, go pursue more money. Like,
that's how I took
like,
it,
as if, like, maybe, like, almost to say, like, as if there was somebody encroaching on his business. And now he needs to expand to, like, match people or, like, to overtake people.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it was like, this guy would have had at least 1 to 3 fronts. You know, he would have had multiple fronts. You know, we already know about the mortuary business.
Mm-hmm.
But, like...
There's probably multiple.
Yeah, they're in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like in a guy like that, in a space like that, you got to imagine that you have family.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have family, and these are Jews, so they all have really big families.
Mm-hmm.
And even outside of the mob aspect of it, like the Jewish culture shops with themselves.
Yeah.
So if you think about, well, Petey wants to open up a deli. Well, Petey needs money, so we're going to give Petey money, and then Petey's going to pay us a portion of that. And the idea of, like, you know, there's also this protection aspect. And not to say Petey's going to pay us for protection because he's a cousin, but Petey might, you know. And even in the same space of, like, each business that another family member owns, you're going to have a piece of it.
Yeah.
You know, because it's just like where they're going to get the startup money from, you know?
That's true.
And so in that way, you know, you'd imagine that he's giving people, could have hands in the community, just as a space of being in the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, like, and so, like, there's these realities that this man is going to be having multiple sources of incomes. It's always coming to him in every moment.
Mm-hmm.
To where, like, to think that he needs to go rob the fucking Federal Reserve is even an option or of necessity.
Like,
it's like, what the
doing?
hell are you doing?
Exactly.
It's like, we need to do this?
Yes.
It's like
what's the point at this point? You're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was definitely like yeah, like it definitely, like, you could say, like, and I guess, you know, in the idea of why he took the words "you're crazy" so personally, because like in himself he probably knew he was crazy.
Probably acknowledged it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's why it was so visceral and, like, agitating, because he himself knew that there was something up, you know, and, like, and so, yeah, I could totally, like, acknowledge that now I think about it. But it's like, it's funny to, like, to this space where this guy who doesn't need to do any of this stuff is taking these massive amounts of action to just ruin his life, to get himself killed, you know, when, like, he's probably highly protected. And I mean, I don't know, like, he's in a mob movie, he's in a mob situation, so yes, there are people who are probably always trying to kill him at any moment, because, like, he in his own world has a business that's either is encroaching on somebody else's territory or somebody wants his territory.
Yeah.
So that's always present, you know?
Yeah.
There's always going to be somebody new coming up, you know? So it's
that
like,
makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, like, in the idea of, like, you know, oh, I'm a gangster and I'm a mobster, you know, like, yeah, at that point, at that level, yeah, he's at the level where he needs protection. He needs to have a gun. Like, people are going to be shooting for him, you know what I mean? You know, in whatever context.
Yeah.
But, like...
That makes sense.
But, yeah, like, yeah, it's funny, like, just to go to that space of, oh, we need to rob the Federal Reserve, adverse to, like, doing anything else. Like, you know, it's, like, so funny.
Yeah. and so that culminates to, like, the turning point, which is where De Niro, Noodles is forced to make the decision to rat out on Max. And so that's where now, you know, where I said about the whole thing coming, like, and, you know, jumping around, that's where we start to see, like, the pieces that were that were, like, you know, earlier in the movie that were laid. We start to see, like, them start to come back and make sense. So, you know, that phone call that Robert De Niro received early in the movie when he's in the opium, and, you know, and he's with the Chinese people, you start to see that was his way of, like, you know, obviously besides the guilt of drowning out all of that sorrow and all that kind of thing that he had to pull on James Woods when he had to make that one phone call. And so, you know, later on in the movie, when De Niro's was retrieved, as we saw early in the movie, and it comes back, and De Niro is faced with meeting with because at first, because the gangsters went as far, the ones that killed the woman, to also try and tie up and threaten to kill Fat Joe, Deborah's brother, who De Niro saved. And so from there, De Niro goes back and meets with James Woods and his crew. And of course, after all the stuff that happened, like, especially more James Woods is not really so much keen on having De Niro be in the same room as him. But, there's kind of that interesting aspect that they have where, even though De Niro did all this stuff to James Woods, there's still, I guess, some kind of level of like respect for him, because like that's also the scene where he goes off on the Planet Blonde and tells him to get the fuck out, because he's just kind of like laying his power in front of De Niro, and pretty much saying, look, like, I'm still that same guy, like nothing's changed about me. And yeah, I mean, sure, like, he's always been that charismatic guy who calls the shots, but you really do see how lost he's become in the lifestyle that he's now fully enthralled himself into, which is the gangster lifestyle. So, from there, the movie doesn't really like dive like all into the rest of the 20 years that go on to the 60s. But what we learn later on, when we jump sort of into the present time of the movie, 68, when De Niro's now a much older man. So De Niro is, he meets with he meets with a lot of people that were still alive. Most of the people that he knew are dead, or have been killed, including, we're led to believe at first, James Woods' Max character. So he comes back and he meets with Fat Mo, excuse me. They kind of like get their reconnection there, and then that all leads back to him trying to get reconnected with his sister Deborah, who they finally have a nice rekindling as well, where wouldn't say she accepts his apology or accepts anything about it, because they still have not really good terms that they end on.
You can talk about that.
Yeah.
So as a pause of that,
yeah,
I would like to acknowledge the whole Deborah space.
Oh, please do.
So like you may mention earlier of like the idea of the relationship between them. So like Deborah is in love with Noodles from the beginning of the scene, beginning of the movie. She's like, he might be the only person who probably actually really even paid attention to her, because she's just a girl and she's just doing whatever she's doing. And in that way, yes, they play the hard to get, because you would imagine that her dad would be raising her with certain class compared to like the street kid that Noodle is. And then by the time that Noodle, goes to jail and comes back, and they have that scene of the rekindling, like when they go out to dinner, because Noodles now has money. Noodles can dress, inappropriate, because there's that scene of like when he talks about I'm gonna give it to her. She says, "Look at you, like you're not. You don't have any class.
Yeah, you're a roach.
You're a roach." And they look at themselves, and then and from that space, you have when they come to rekindle, they're at the dinner, and De Niro's telling them everything, like, hey, I loved you from all then, like all I thought about was you while I was locked up, and like you, like in a lot of ways, like she would be one of the reasons that kept him going, because like in a lot of space, like he went into jail at 13 or whatever, and didn't really have nothing to look forward to, or any type of reality, like there was nothing that, it's just he was a kid coming out of jail. So it's like, and again, like I don't believe it's this space of anybody was really speaking to him. Like I don't think there were people writing them and stuff like that.
No.
And so maybe mom,
of course,
but like in that way, like he's just not getting to be able to reconnect to people, and like he's telling that, now look at me, I'm not a roach anymore. And she makes the space to say that, like, she's like, if we got together, you would just hide me away. And he's like, yeah, I probably would, you know, because he loves her. He doesn't want him to go anywhere, you know, that whatever. However you see that as like some chauvinistic way or some idea of just love, you know, because in her world, she's a movie star, she's an actress, she's moving, she's always doing stuff, you know, auditions, you know, and in that space, it would be like, well, I can take care of you, you don't need to do that. And that would be like the motif of it. Even if it wasn't this hard chauvinistic, like, I'm going to keep you submissive, it would be like, well, you don't have to do that. And it probably would be like the rejection, and then like there would be this idea of like, well, like, you're crying to me about this thing, and why are you going to do it? Like, and then like, you know, at that level, it could get tough, because like if somebody, you know, makes her cry, and then he's gonna get mad, he's a gangster, like he's gonna handle that. You know?
Pretty much.
And it's like and so in that space, she's like, well, I wouldn't even mind being your wife and being, you know, in that wife role, but I have to go live my life. This is all I've ever done. This is all I ever wanted. And like, I have to go live. And so it comes to that space where she's like, I'm leaving for Hollywood tomorrow, which is like so funny, because like somehow it matched up to where like they go on this fancy, super schmancy dinner where he literally, like, this building, this place, this restaurant was closed for the winter. He opened the place back up and like had this whole like place for her, in a sense of like I can afford anything you ever want, you know, and like he really could in that time period. And so but she goes and she tells him that, oh, I love you too, and they're in the car, but I can't be with you. So they're in the car, and like she tries to, like, she's like, say they're 5 minutes out from the house, 2 minutes, 10 minutes out from the house, and she's like, I want to kiss you, and she doesn't say it, but she like gets in his face, and he's so detached and distraught that like he's like not even responding to like kissing her. And then it moves into the space of like, you know, the very touchy scene of like where like De Niro, or you know, Max takes, not Max, but Noodles takes it, and so it's like it turns into like, so it gets into the scene of the women of the space, and so you get into this reality where the women of the space, like even Peggy has a scene with Noodles in the beginning where like you know, everyone acknowledges that she's like the whore of the neighborhood, and he's like trying to like feel on her and trying to like hook up with her, and so it comes to the space where it's like, for a woman to be groped and a woman to like almost be like, you know, put in a space where like you're gonna have sex now, it's not like it's faux pas. It doesn't seem like it doesn't happen in a casual space, and at least Peggy anyway. And like, but the dynamic of the women in the space, because you then have the next scene with Noodles where he hits a platinum blonde, and then the platinum blonde's like hit me, make it seem good, and then he hooks up with her, and she's fainting rate, because you'd imagine that anything after that scene in like a real life moment of like all the guys who worked at the jewelry store who heard like that happen because it was in another room, like they're looking at her like, oh man, I'm so sorry that happened to you, you know, like what can we do, you know, like they probably went all out for her,
like trying to compensate her.
And not even on like some money level shit. It's like, we're men in this room who just got fucking like subdued, and there was nothing that we could do. You know, like there's like levels of like those men probably feel bad about themselves that they couldn't stop that. You know, like, oh my God, I've worked with you for so long. I might consider you my friend or whatever. And it's like, I might know your husband, or, you know, like know people. And it's like, we might have a relationship as a person that could have been working with you for a while. Like, fuck, you just got raped. Like, that's awful. You know, like they probably really felt bad about that. You know what I mean? Like in real life.
They probably did.
Yeah. And so it's like, and then you have another scene with Noodles, where it's like these 3 scenes of motif of the women, of like this space where, of now you have this space where, he's in this scene with this woman, and you almost would think that, not like she would be accepting of it, but more into a space of like, you know, I guess as the scene turns, like, so she's like, no, I don't want to have sex, and like he takes it
and throws himself on her, and then the scene changes, and you would imagine that like that's Fat Mo's sister. They all know her, so you would imagine like she would have said something.
you know, or like something would have happened, but like no, she just goes and carries on with her life and
Never mentions it.
And even furthermore, she's actually still in longing of the guy, because like you can kind of almost see like there's like this space of like where it's like it's not like she's broken up about it, and then she kind of sees him as like, I guess she sees him as she's pulling off in the train, and she just pulls down the curtain. It's not like a shock, and she starts crying that she saw him again after that happened.
Really doesn't want to see his face at all.
Yeah. It's not like she took it personal, and like, and so it's like the motif of the woman in this era of like, you know, like it's like almost like the acceptance of being an object, you know, and not like this idea of like this personality of the traditional woman of today, where like if something happened like that, you know, you would imagine there's this emotional breakdown, or like there's this like, you know, she's about to go tell the cops. And not to say that like there's a lot of times that like rapes actually don't get reported because of all the social backlash, but it's like it's still this space of like when you move into like towards the end of the movie, and then you get the a moment where they come back and meet each other again, like after 30 years, she doesn't even trip out again. It's like, it's almost like she's just, I didn't ever expect to see you again. You know, it's like it was just whatever.
Yeah.
You know, but it was like, it was almost like this moment of like, even though that happened, they were still friends, and like in that space where like most rapes actually happen in that type of situation. Like most rapes actually happen to women that they know the man. It's not like some creepy dude
that just comes up
back
to them
alley and just like pulls you aside and like, you know, just some awful thing. It was like most rapes actually, like if you look at statistics or whatever, it's the women knew the guy.
Interesting.
And so it's like, you know, it's like a very interesting dynamic of the woman of that era, because, you know, like these situations happen into these moments. That's the idealistic aspect of rape.
Yeah.
And like, you know, and it's almost like it's not a faux pas. It's like it was almost to say it was so casual that to present it in this movie wasn't even a shocking moment.
No.
Like we shouldn't have even seen that and gotten offended, because it was like a casual space almost, you know, and like, you know, it's an interesting dynamic, because the way it happens again, you talk about Noodles in the bathroom, like roping on her, talking about like, hey, I'll pay you tomorrow, let's just have sex today.
Right, I don't care.
And then you go like 2 scenes later where like Peggy's upstairs with an obvious, you know, 40, 50-year-old man who's having sex, and she's like 15, 14.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it's like, so obviously the idea of woman being an object is a casual space, you know, because even the woman who's like they tell you that when you finally get to meet the woman who's the platinum blonde, they say that her relationship with her husband is that they come to the brothel on the weekend and she will just fuck 10 men while the guy watches. You know, another idea of like her being an object. She could like sex or whatever, but at the same time, they don't need the money because he's in insurance. But like, it's like the idea of it being an object. And then even the space of you, like Max's relationship with her is very like obviously Max quote unquote loved her because he chose her out of any woman he could just get.
And he had a kid with her.
And he had did they have a kid later?
They do, yeah. We'll get into that in a minute, but yeah, they do.
I don't know if that's her kid. It's like, so in that space, he's like, I could just leave her any moment. You want to dump her? I'll dump her, you know? And like you said, she had a horrible relationship. So it's like, it's just the idea of like the way they dramatize women in this space, in the sense of like being an object, and then furthermore in this like, but to give the relationship of Deborah and Noodles, it's like, you know, you have this moment where like they really did love each other, and she just wanted to make sure she got to really live her life to the fullest. And, you know, and then like, you know, yeah, so I would say like they actually loved each other, but it was just the worlds couldn't collide in the way that they wanted to. And like what was so funny to me was like, it's like he played himself so much, like it was just like, and like it totally changed the whole movie, because after that moment happened, the next scene, like it's an intermission,
right.
And then they come in. He comes back into the room, and like everybody's looking at him,
Yeah.
and like we find out why, because he's been addicted to heroin from that time frame to this time frame.
Sure.
But like it's the same time. It's a space where it's like we look at him different now, and everybody's looking at him different.
Yeah,
now.
because he just ratted on James Woods too.
Not yet.
Oh,
no,
wasn't it?
like so. What I'm speaking to is like the moment where we have the Deborah rape scene. There's an intermission, and then the next visual scene is where he walks into the back room, gives the scene about, hey, the platinum blonde's now my woman, and like if you don't want her to be here, then fuck her. I'll just leave her. I'll dump her. Get out. And so what I'm saying is that it's like you have like everybody's looking at Noodles different now. And I was saying, like, it's so funny how he played himself. I mean, like, he went down this path that just didn't make any sense. Because, at any moment, he could have allowed her to go do the thing she was going to do anyway, and that she did do, and go be a fucking movie star. And at any moment, he could have just been sending her money. At any moment, he could have just went and bought a house in fucking L.A. or wherever she was at, and fucking just showed up, popped up on her, and didn't even buy a house. Like, he could have bought a house and put her in it.
Sure.
And just been a sugar daddy.
Yeah. And
then when he wanted to go out to L.A. because she obviously loved him, but she wanted to live her life, she could have fucking he could have popped up on her.
Right.
And it's so funny because like he just played himself and he like put himself in a spiral that made no sense. Like he just it was just like he got desperate. Like, oh my God, all I've wanted is you for my whole life, and you're about to leave, and I'll never get you again. So I gotta get it now. And they're just like, bro, like what
Chill
the
out.
fuck?
I know.
Like you could she just told you she loved you. She just told you that all she wanted to do was just go try and be a fucking movie star, and you know she could be, and you believe in her to be from even the space of he knew she was being that age, being a kid to being that moment of where they taking her out to dinner. He knew she was special. He knew that she could go do it. It's not like he was like. You want to do this, but you alright. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it was just chill and just be my wife because you alright. He was he knew she could be a star, and it's like bro, you could have allowed that and just showed up as the high class male, the non-roach, and fucking showed the fuck up.
Sure.
And it was you got the money to do it, you got the clout to do it. You don't. None of these businesses are ran by you. They don't need you to be here for him to keep making money.
Right.
So it's just there's this reality of he literally could have just bought his own house in fucking LA and just been in LA, and then whenever he just would pop up on her and maybe not on no creep level shit, but I'm just saying there was so many avenues that this guy could have did that didn't involve him raping her and virtually putting his life in a heroin addict situation. It's he became a heroin addict because he raped her.
Right.
And it's and he lost everything in his world. And it was just bro, that's so wild that you would choose this path, for no reason. For no reason. It's not she was I know you love me and I know you thought about me every day in jail, but you cool. You still the little boy from the block.
Pretty much. That's why I took it.
But she didn't do that though. It's if she did do that, I could not to say I agree with it, but to watch the movie, I could understand why he would have did it.
Yeah.
Because she virtually, if she would have nagged him and been nah, bro, I only kind of liked you, and now you're this guy, and I don't want to be a part of this world, so take me home, kind of thing. I could kind of understand why he would have gotten desperate in his own world and would have flipped in that way. It would have made sense based upon the line of the action of the movie, but everything was in his favor. He just impressed the fuck out of her. No guy's probably gonna be able to do that. You know what I mean? Just in the way that he did it, and she already loved him since she was a kid.
Pretty much.
So it's no one's ever gonna get that pussy. Even if they got the pussy, no one's gonna hit it the same way you're gonna be able to hit it because she actually loves you.
Yeah.
And it's it was just this reality that made no fucking sense in that space of actual situations. So, it's it was definitely wild, but it definitely leads into to when they do meet up later on.
Yeah, in the end. And he reunites with James Woods, who we were thought, as I said, was killed, and it turns out James Woods is actually alive. He faked his death. He's now a senator, and I guess somehow through all those connections and everything we saw earlier in the movie, now he's he's still a senator with big money, but yet his face is all over. So that's kind of the interesting aspect that confused a little bit of me and definitely more of Alfred when he was watching that. But I mean, you kind of just like let the movie pass because like I mean, also the movie's almost done. But this is where the moment where the two characters, the two friends, finally reunite, and De Niro, of course, has this shock moment where he's shocked that James Woods Max is alive, but he's also shocked that he hid this from him for so long, and he even says to one point, because James Wood is pretty much miserable despite all this lifestyle and luxurious living that he's currently in right now. He's very miserable, and he says, "Yeah, I'm a dead man walking at this point, and I mean, after all that shit I've done, I might as well just end my life. But I don't want anybody just randomly that I don't fucking know just to like kill me. If somebody's gonna fucking kill me, I want it to be somebody that I actually trust, like you, to De Niro. So De Niro rejects it because he's like, look, like you're my best friend, but I don't know who you are anymore. I know the man that you were before." But I'm not going to kill this man that I don't know who you are now. So, it's kind of interesting because then De Niro, like, he's at this party that James Woods hosting with his son who looks exactly like him. And so at one point when De Niro leaves the party, De Niro sees James Woods walk out of the mansion, and James Wood is coming toward. And this is also interesting because like this is one of those kind of leave it up to interpretation endings, because James Wood, I don't know if you caught that, but James Wood walks up and there's a garbage can truck that comes by, and we see James Wood walk around the corner into like what we think he's gonna hop into the garbage can truck, and next thing we know James Woods is gone. And so De Niro's looking there, he's shocked, and then these group of kids come by listening to music, and you're kind of like just left there wondering, like, he is like, okay, wait a minute, like, did he kill himself? Because I was left there like, did he kill himself? Did he like hop inside that thing, like, and just a little blood, like, did he shred? Like, well, what happened? And then when the kids passed by, I was like, okay, so like me, I'm just thinking like, and then so it kind of like leaves the interpretation, I guess, is he's already faked his death before. Maybe he did it, maybe he finally accepted it, or maybe he just disappeared into that crowd and we'll never see him again. And so that's kind of where the movie concludes pretty much as far as De Niro's story arc, James Woods' story arc, and what everything has been leading to. And then also I forgot to mention one of the last things that James Wood looks at that De Niro leaves him with before he disappears again is the pocket watch that they both robbed from that guy. So that's what I'm saying, these details in the movie that they drop for you, it's like you really got to pay attention to it. And so
I think for me,
yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely looking into the garbage can to see a truck to see if
he was alive
or something.
Yeah,
and like maybe he jumped on the side and just kept moving. Like kind of when you got the rail on the side of the truck. And then when the kids drove past, I actually think that was David. Like, because when you actually saw David's scene, David was outside, which is Max's son, and then from there. He's outside with his woman and some friends, and they're by cars. And contextually, we can imagine the night's over in that way. Okay. And so
interesting aspect.
And so it's like they drive past and they throw the bottles and stuff. And like, I mean, I don't know if the bottles breaking was like the reminiscence of, you could say like champagne. When champagne's broken, it's kind of like a christening, or it's like even like the idea of the prohibition over, but that would have been 30 years past, so it wouldn't have really made sense. But at the same time, it could have been like this. If it was like an idea of the christening, then the christening aspect of the release of like whatever, because in whatever space, you'd imagine that Noodles would have probably had this hang up over on his head, like this, like he, as she said, Deborah said, we're getting old. All we have is our memories. And she said, if you go to that party, we won't have any memories anymore. And so, in the space of like the release of like the space of who people are or were, it's like he would have, in his world, would imagine he would have ratted out on his friends, and they would have got caused to die. And then, so he could have been hung up on that. And then in that space of like, oh, well, you leave this party, the memories are over, sense of christening, of release of that memory, So it's like, it's kind of like, that's kind of my interpretation of it in that way. And then it would have been even more in the space, if that's true, for that to be David, which is Max's son, to release them in that space, because it's like this generational idea of it, because David is the character played young Max but with red hair.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like to see that guy see the young Max, and then if he's the guy who's like to the idea of like, oh, this is the adult Max that like turned and all this shit that happened and caused and created all these random events, to the old Max or the young Max that I remember when I first met him, kind of releasing the space of all those negative memories.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a funny, relationship, if that was what was actually being played. But in the space of for that to have been said to be played, that's a cool idea of it. Like the young Max is releasing the responsibility or the guilt, of what Noodles thought he would have created, because whatever. But it's like, so it's funny space for me of what I felt happened in that moment, and yeah, it was definitely a confusing space, to say the least.
Yes.
Of what happened at the end.
Yes. Leaves a lot to be interpreted.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of just interesting that this movie is I don't know. I was not knowing what to expect with this movie, honestly, going into it, and I kind of just came away like thinking to myself, man, like, wow, suddenly I don't think Scorsese's gangster movies are looking that hardcore anymore. I feel like this movie alone, I think this is only like Sergio Leone's only like real gangster movie that he's actually made that's in that era with these like kind of aspects and all these different things. And so I think that the way that everybody was portrayed and all the whole story, the movie, like I said, is freaking almost 4 hours long, but I have to say, like, I really didn't, for like probably especially like I would say like the last like hour to like 40 minutes, I really didn't feel like that much time was still in the movie. I felt like, okay, like I'm just invested in these characters. Like, when the intermission popped up, I was like, oh shit, there's intermission, and we only have like an hour left in the movie. So like, okay. But I just thought like, wow, the movies, I can only imagine seeing this in theaters, like how much like you had to have really just like, like been like, okay, I'm going to watch a movie, better have used the bathroom, better like bring everything that I needed here, because like I'm not going anywhere.
They give you an intermission.
They do, but like the movie's already halfway done at that point, so like you better have taken care of your business before. So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's cool. So yeah, we have very good thoughts about the movie that we were glad we could share with you guys, and we'll be doing more of this retro reviews kind of thing. This is actually one of the few segments that I mentioned prior that we will be kind of doing things leading into, like I said, the winter, for like outside of movie reviews that I'm already kind of like brainstorming right now as we speak. But this was something that was long, like, dormant in my mind. Like, as much as I love reviewing new movies, I was looking at a lot of, kind of classical movies, like, of, like, the last, like I said, 30, 40 years. And I was thinking, I don't know, like, especially for a lot of these movies that I've never really seen to this day, like, I wonder what my, and especially both of our take would be if we were to review it. But this was something that I wanted to dedicate just purely to a whole episode around just talking about old movies. So one of the things, I'm set on this, but one of the things that I'm thinking about getting into is those that are familiar with The Matrix. We might dive into something like that, just to, like, he's even brought up recently too, like, movies like in part of a series or trilogy that we thought was the best out of all of them. If you guys have seen the Matrix trilogy, it shouldn't be hard to say that the first one's probably the best out of all of them. So just for that, we might even just get into that, just for like the special, hey, like, let's throw it back and dive into like the whole trilogy and see like where they were going with this story. But yeah, we'll get into that pretty soon here. But thanks for joining us on the Retro Review segment, and we'll see you guys very soon.